Hello, welcome to Cinema Savvy, and welcome back to another review. This is a documentary film, actually, so this isn't like one of our usual reviews. We were granted a free screener for a documentary called More Than Miyagi, the Pat Morita Story. Now, we've covered the Karate Kid films on the channel, and Cobra Kai as well. It's a franchise that we absolutely love. So we saw this, and we jumped at the opportunity to get a screener for this thing if we could. And thankfully we did. So this is a documentary directed by Kevin Derrick. And yeah, it basically highlights the life of Pat Morita. Now, as a Karate Kid fan, I love the character of Mr. Miyagi, but there's a lot in this documentary that I had no idea about. It's kind of weird that he's one of my favorite characters in film history, but I really don't know a lot about the man. So that's entirely what this documentary is about. There's a lot of celebs involved in it, and it goes into his life and the really dark side of his life too, towards the end. So we're going to go a bit through it as well, give our opinions, some of our negatives maybe, but some things. But we really did like this documentary. But before we do, we'll go right into the socials.
Absolutely, guys. As always, if you want to find out what we're doing, what we're up to, then the best way is to get us on our social medias, which is Facebook Cinema Savvy, Twitter at Cinema_Savvy. We're back on Letterboxd at letterboxd.com/Cinema Savvy, and we have a link to our TeePublic store in the description below. And this is a bit different. If anyone has seen More Than Miyagi, then do comment along, let us know your thoughts, because I'm quite new to Karate Kid, as we discussed on our retro reviews. These aren't films I've seen before, and I certainly didn't know anything pretty much about Pat Morita's personal life. So, as an insight straight away, this documentary is definitely one for any Karate Kid or Cobra Kai fan to watch. But as I said, we want you guys to comment along, and if you do enjoy this, do make sure to like that and do subscribe, because we've got a hell of a lot of reviews coming up. We've got a lot of videos coming up. We have had a very busy weekends. And you'll see why in the next couple of days. We've got a screener popping up on Thursday on the channel at 3 p.m, which I can't officially name, but it's about a Brazilian footballer who won 3 World Cups. So I'll make that as obvious as it could possibly be. And yeah, Chris has already just dropped his Snyder Cut Justice League, whatever we want to call it, trailer reaction.
Quite controversially, probably in a few hours time, we'll find out.
We'll find out. I've not even checked that out yet. That's how sort of not last minute, but the trailer came like 2 hours early or something ridiculous. So yeah, we live in a society, don't we, Chris? And this society in general is not going to be talking about Jared Leto today. We're going to, of course, be talking about Pat Morita.
Absolutely. Now, we've had a comment from Carl, says, will this be on Netflix? So we watched it on Vimeo. I know it's on video on demand. I know you can rent or buy it, I believe. But do you know more about the platforms that it's available on?
Yeah, so it's on PVOD, so that's Premium Video on Demand. I believe it's $5.99 on Amazon, Apple, and those ones, which is I don't think that's a rent. I think you can rent it as well for like £2 or £3. So you can access it. It's newly been released, and I believe it came out last week. We were contacted very late on Friday, asking if it's something we'd like to cover, and we both said yes straight away. So we may even have some more stuff on the channel about this documentary this week. So if you guys at home, as an initial thought, I said I do recommend this, but also do seek it out. It is worth watching, but you can get it on any website or company that does PVOD. So do check it out. It'll be nearer the top of the new releases.
Definitely. So I was just looking at the director here. So Kevin Derrick, you see him at the very end of the credits in the documentary, and he doesn't go into much depth about how he knows Pat Morita or why he wanted to tell this story. So that's quite an interesting thing to find out. But I've just checked through his credits, and he seems like he's a lifelong Karate Kid fan as well. Some of his previous documentaries that he's worked on, whether he's been a producer or he's actually made them himself. Let me just have a look on here. You've got The Real Miyagi, which he made in 2015. There's Empty Hand, The Real Karate Kids. That was 2011. And now we get this one. So just from those credits alone, you get the impression that this is definitely a project and a man that was very near and dear to his heart as well, and a story that he wanted to tell. So yeah, I mean, I kind of pitched it at the beginning. So the context of the documentary is just to shed light, on the life of Pat Morita. It goes through pretty much his childhood. It goes into that really harrowing stuff as well around his childhood, which again, I was completely unaware of. Him breaking into show business, his first few roles, and what I quite like the angle of this documentary as well. Sort of because, I mean, we discuss films and sort of trends in cinema and everything. was the sort of the stereotypes in Hollywood at the time, and even kind of permeating into today's films as well. They reference Doctor Strange and Ghost in the Shell, which were like two examples that stood out to me. And basically all the pitfalls that anyone in show business or who's a struggling actor to try and acquire work, going from the highest highs, for example, of the Karate Kid films, and then all the fame and accolades that come from something like that after those films are finished, and an aging actor, an aging Asian actor as well, struggling to find work. So that it kind of encapsulates all of his life, really. And it obviously interviews a bunch of celebs who worked with him in the past on various projects. But sort of the biggest takeaway from me as well, because as I said, Karate Kid films was, and this is kind of on me as well, were the only films that I really saw him in. And that kind of speaks volumes as well. I'm sure a lot of people are in the same boat as well, where it is that typecasting where there is such a strong fan base who love him as an actor, but they've only seen him in that sort of like one famous franchise. I did used to watch Happy Days back in the day as well on reruns, but I've got to admit, I don't think I've seen any episodes with Pat Morita's character in there. So I just found it fascinating just to learn more about the guy's life, because even, especially like learning about stuff about his life, it even kind of recontextualizes and puts things into perspective with certain scenes in, at least in the first Karate Kid film. And probably some things in there revolving around Miyagi's character that he could draw a reference from his personal life as well.
Yeah, definitely. And I don't think we can talk about a couple of them. So the big one to me, aside sort of him being a child, is the Japanese internment camps. So, you know, on the channel, we're not history buffs, but when we do get that sort of real life history, it's always something really interesting. And, you know, at the age of 11, as World War II happening, the Japanese and the Americans were involved, Pearl Harbor's happened, and his family sent to an internment camp, which is basically not death camps as such, but they're almost there, that America's had for all sort of Asian Americans. And what was really fascinating is that, you know, we all know him as Mr. Miyagi, and that's the whole point of this, is that, you know, there's more to him than this. And it doesn't sit there and say, hey, you all know Mr. Miyagi, here's his life story. They build up to Karate Kid, and also they actually do something really interesting with the Karate Kid stuff that, because I've never seen Happy Days, you know, I know a couple of bits about it, but I didn't know he had a role. And they were kind of explaining kind of what you were going on, Chris, with certainly with the sort of Asian American actors. They were all stereotyped from the get-go, from when they were younger. And then what was fascinating for me was the Pat Morita, that he became a very rare sort of Asian American that had a breakout role in Happy Days. And then he was stereotyped as his character name from that sitcom. And that's something that happens to, I think, pretty much every major sitcom, or is referred to as this or that. And the fact that the studio didn't want him to be in Karate Kid was amazing. Sorry, not amazing, but the revelation that this wasn't painting this perfect picture of how Karate Kid was this perfectly formed thing. It was all perfect. That they had no intention of casting him because he'd been known as this person on Happy Days. And it was only until they'd sort of done an audition without producers knowing, they sent it off to them, they had to get him. And then off the back of Karate Kid stuff we all know about, then he has gone from being known as only the character from Happy Days to only being Mr. Miyagi. And he's only going to get these mentor roles and those kind of roles. And I thought it was really fascinating, especially with some of the people that they brought on to the documentary for that, certainly those that have some of that experience of being something similar. And that's why I think immediately, aside from the film stuff, getting that real life history to go along with it, I think really emphasized sort of some of the issues he faced along the way and how he ended up being the way he was towards the latter part of his life. And I think that's something really fascinating. This film isn't just a beautiful look at his career. No, this goes into it and how it became the career it did. And I think that's really important as a reflection of sort of modern cinema as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it was the documentary aided itself to that as well by interviewing actors similarly, like another Asian American, James Hong, as well, who probably went through a lot of the same things. I think that's the section actually where it talks about films like Breakfast at Tiffany's, which is a film that I haven't seen. I know it's regarded as one of the greatest films ever made, but that character in there, those stereotypes. But you even see that in Pat Morita's stand-up as well in his shows, where he's intentionally poking fun at that stereotype, and he'll come out and he'll speak in this really stereotypical way and then snap back to his regular voice and get on with the show. But is often the case with a lot of comedians, there is that darker side to it as well. And usually, Robin Williams is probably like a standout example here, but there's probably countless other ones as well. They use their comedy as a mask to hide deeper pain and like a deeper depression. And I mean, you've just got to look at this guy's, his childhood growing up. He was in and out of hospital probably for like 9 years, was it, or something? He had some kind of spinal disorder that he had to get fixed. And he was sort of cast aside. I think he was raised by his aunt, I think it said in the documentary. So there's a lot of things that went on in his upbringing. And clearly that permeated into his adult life as well. I don't know if it was like the stresses of show business and everything like that, but it does go into his alcoholism and his depression. And you don't often hear that side of the story. And that's why, fair play to this documentary for kind of shedding light on that. Because now, as I mentioned, sort of recontextualizing things, you have that scene in the first Karate Kid film. The scene that they were going to remove from the film, actually, I think we talked about that on our review for it. The scene that got him the Oscar nomination, that complete, like when I watch that again now, with the knowledge that I have from this documentary and what was going on in his life, because he even talks about like camps in that, doesn't he? That like internment camps for his wife in it, and obviously he's drunk in that scene as well. I think it's definitely going to hit differently now when I come to watch that film again, specifically that scene. But as I said, like I was completely clueless. So this documentary really did shine light on everything. Like like as I mentioned, the highest highs and the lowest lows of his career as well.
Yeah, exactly. And that's the story that you want it to sort of tell. You need to know, documentaries are interesting because so many of them, so specifically on sort of well-known celebrities, actors, or whatnot, they can be biased, which is fine. But when it's we're only going to paint the good half of this person's life, or we're going to speak about this amazing thing they did, and I think sometimes they need to, I don't want to sound horrible, sort of pull punches, but when you're not afraid to show that maybe this person wasn't always the sort of the shining light of armor that they were made out to be, and it's what they speak about in this is that Pat did have his demons and they followed him for decades. And I think that hit home differently, rather than be this amazing, oh, look at how great his career was, being, one of the first actors to break stereotypes for this and this, and being one of the first actors to nominate for an Oscar, and let's close it here. Spoke about some of the issues. There's a big reunion for Happy Days, which has a really important scene on, which sort of shows how much he was struggling in later life, and a lot of it is told, obviously, via the stories of his wife. And I think that's something which we kind of both want to bring, that one absence from this is that at the end of the film, it does say that his daughter's declined to be involved in the documentary. They do mention that he had 3 marriages in the documentary, and that the wife that is into most of it is the wife that he was still married to at the time they passed away. Now, we don't know the real politics of it, so we don't obviously sort of spur stuff, but the daughters have on record over the last sort of 10 years said that they were separated when he passed away. But with the wife being such a controlling part of this documentary, and a lot of it flows through her stories, I'm not saying it disassociates itself at all from it, but there are some parts where, for whatever reasons, the daughters weren't involved in it. I would have loved to have had the perspective of the daughters on some of those issues with him in his later life. Would he go to the daughters to discuss things with them? Because we were only told about stories of the daughters by their wife, and I'm not saying it's not authentic at all, but I think me and you probably both would have maybe have seen that, and they've got every right to not be involved. But one of my only criticisms of the film is that at times it feels as if it's the wife telling the story, and it's not directed by her. And I'm not taking that with the Dutch. I thought it was really well done, but some of the best of his when she's not involved, I think. And when they're with the people he's worked with, when it's the people that have the other stories which they might not know about, it does hit differently. When you've got the original Karate Kid cast on there as well, Martin Clove telling some great stories that they'd been in a dreadful film with each other, and he's laughing about how bad the film was years down the line. And you've got Ralph Macchio, which we know about, who's spoken years about how important he was to him, but how he didn't make enough contact with him in late life. And looking back at those clips now, and that's reflected in Cobra Kai. And I wonder how much of that was Ralph Macchio. I maybe could have done a little bit more, or weren't always there. And even when one of the Cobra Kai kids is in it, saying he made me this amazing, there's some really heartwarming stories, and I loved hearing this stuff like that. And I think that one of the best ones of all of them was Henry Winkler, who's spoken about. I think for Henry Winkler, the career he's had, the respect he has, And we always say every interview, he's always nice. Every film he's in, he's always funny. He's always great. He's the Fonz. And when we're getting some of this, I don't want to call it behind the scenes drama, but when we're hearing about the sort of the hard stuff that Pat Morita went through, and Henry Winkler was there, and he was always there for him. And I think that hit home a lot, was that it doesn't matter if this person was an A-lister, it doesn't matter if they were a teenager and a Karate Kid, they were there for him, but it seemed like Pat was always there for them.
Yeah, and Henry Winkler, like, he's an actor I've always admired, and from this documentary as well, you get that he came from a place of understanding as well. And he may not have been there all the time, but you get the sense that, you know, he says that this is show business. We all have our demons, and he seemed really down to earth about it. So, yeah, and when it goes into his side, I thought that was actually one of the most emotional bits of the documentary, was seeing his reaction and him reflecting on that Happy Days reunion with him. But going back to the negatives that we had, where you mentioned about Pat Morita's third wife, yeah, it feels like a documentary in two halves. And the stuff that I gravitated towards the most was the more factual stuff, with clips of him and the interviews with the celebrities to help create this picture. I don't want to say it was like a vanity project, but it did kind of stray into that kind of territory in parts, where it seemed like she was sort of like dominating the documentary, and, you know, sort of the veneer of that kind of thing. And that's the kind of part that did take me out of the documentary quite a bit. And it is a shame that they didn't get to interview the daughters, because to me, the best documentaries are the ones that interview everyone and you get everyone's side of the story. And then from that, you can sort of draw your own conclusions, or see common ground, or where threads cross over, or where something might be contradictory. And you can sort of like paint the picture yourself from all the different walks of life. Now, we only get it from the ex-wife there. We don't get it from that side of it as well. And I think that's quite telling, that none of them wanted to be interviewed. We don't know the reasons. I'd be interested to know the reasons. But yeah, if I was going to point to any negative, it's where it did kind of stray into that. I don't want to say it was manipulative, because it wasn't.
No, it's the word's not bias. It's because we're only hearing one side of a story. It's just that, not that we can't be sure of it, because that's unfair, but when so much of it is one viewpoint from somebody that is clearly a key point of the life, but we don't know, because it's them telling the story of a story they've been told by somebody. And it's like the sort of Chinese whispers that people say at school, that you know, you kind of want to hear it from the mouths of the people. And I think that is something that people would also say. But again, aside from that, I thought it had been phenomenal.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think it was paced really well as well. I think it's about 90 minutes or so, maybe just slightly over. Thought it was a really good length for it. It moves at a great pace. And yeah, like, the biggest takeaway is that, you know, and if anyone's watching this as well, we've had some people say they're interested in watching it already. If you love the Karate Kid films specifically, and that's all you know, that's where your knowledge of Pat Morita begins and ends. There is so much to take away from this documentary. It is really eye-opening, and it really does help paint that picture of the man behind that character. And if you're into cinema as well, just that whole stereotypical thing, they don't dwell on that loads, but there is a section. And there was an interesting point, which made me think about it as well, that James Hong says, where he says that even the character of Mr. Miyagi himself, you could argue, is like a stereotypical representation. He's the wise old karate master. And I thought, oh, I've never even thought of that. It's not done in like a horrible way, obviously, in the Karate Kid films, but it did make me think, and it did make me question certain things in Hollywood, and we're even kind of seeing it now as well. So it definitely does have a lot of layers to it. My favorite stuff was where it was interviewing the celebrities who had worked with him in the past, and we get more of that personal side to him and his history. But yeah, no, I had a really good time with this documentary, and it genuinely did open my eyes to the guy from a lot of information that I was completely unaware of.
Yeah, and I'm kind of echoing that the discussions with the other actors, the people that he'd had the stories with, who saw his career grow or were involved with him whilst their careers were growing, it's a very fascinating insight into somebody that, again, I don't think a lot of people know much about. The keywords in the title more than Miyagi, and there's a hell of a lot more than I think most people will ever have gone through, even up to the age of 11. So I think, obviously, this is a blatant recommendation. Do watch this. It's very, very well made. Just tell the story, but do be prepared that this isn't the nicest of stories to see what he went through, then seeing how much he struggled to see, you know, not saying getting inside of an Oscars is sort of the pinnacle of lifetime, not at all, but to see the growth from somebody that's told they might not be able to walk, to being in an internment camp during a war, to then being this household name that almost anyone on the planet could probably tell you that knows anything about films. Even most fans could probably say. And I think there's such a beautiful story in there, and they are able to tell that. So I would say 100% do watch this, especially if you've seen any of his other work. There's a good chance you might not know some of these stories.
Absolutely, yeah. And I was just double checking on here. So I went onto IMDb to check, and apparently you can watch this on Prime Video. You can rent or buy it from £3.49. That's pounds sterling. So, I mean, that's nothing, is it? So, I mean, if it's the same price for buying or renting, you may as well buy it, and then you've got it. You can watch it as many times as you want. So I'd absolutely recommend More Than Miyagi, the Pat Morita story. I really enjoyed it, and it's kind of a nice little epilogue really to our reviews that we did on the Karate Kid films to sort of like recontextualize things as well. It's good to do that sort of after. So I thought it was a really good release date for it. But that'll do it from us. So we encourage you to all go and watch it as well. Usually you always say, you know, share your thoughts on it as well. Share some of your favorite moments, some of the roles that you've seen him in, anything like that, and we'll keep the conversation going. And of course, socials. So if you want to follow us on everything else that we're doing, you can follow us on Facebook at Cinema Savvy, Twitter at Cinema_Savvy. We're back on Letterboxd, where we have ticked off More Than Miyagi, the Pat Morita story. So stay updated all there with all the films that we're reviewing in a nice, easy-to-view package. And obviously, TeePublic, if you want to pick up any T-shirts, we have a link in the description down below for that as well. We've got many more shows coming out. I don't know if we're going to list them all again. We absolutely can do, though. WandaVision's on Friday at 8 p.m. For our spoiler discussion on that. Oh God, what else do we have coming out? Thursday.
Beverly Hills Cop.
Beverly Hills Cop. Yeah. Sorry,
We've got so much going on.
We've pre-recorded so many videos. We're still in the process of pre-recording stuff. The whole schedule's out the window. Tuesday next week, yes, retro reviews, Beverly Hills Cop 2. We recorded that review earlier today, actually, so that's a really fun one. Don't miss that one. And on Thursday, we have our new show. This one's going to be a lot of fun. Best Visual Effects. It's the Cinema Savvy Awards. It's our brand new series that we've got coming out that's going to occupy probably about the next 10 weeks. It's going to take us up to the actual night of the Academy Awards. We're going to have fun with that one. It's our own personal picks of films that we think should have won or what we enjoy, some of our favorites that we think deserve to win the Oscar. 3 picks each. That's going to be me, you, and Tate on that one. So don't miss that. And George, you have quite a gargantuan series coming out to the channel in in a month's time.
Yes, the Infinity Saga retrospective. This is going to be myself hosting a series as we go back through the entire Infinity Saga, not MCU, I keep saying that, going through the Infinity Saga from Iron Man through to Spider-Man Far From Home. You may have noticed eagle-eyed viewers that like to look at our walls and posters, because we know there are some of you. I've changed some things behind me. You can now see Captain America's shield, Thor's hammer, and some other things. Chris, what's that reflection in your window? This is going to be starting on March the 1st. We have the first one being recorded in the next couple of days. We have a crazy schedule in hand. I have already started watching these films, and each episode we're going to get different people coming on, talking about maybe their history with the film, what it meant to them, did their opinions change? So much going on. So be sure to check those out when they do start. March the 1st. There's going to be an announcement video before then. Don't know when, don't know where, but we'll meet again.